Hello, I'm Dan Gibson, and this is another video in the question and answer series. Over the last couple of months, I've received at least a dozen emails asking about the newly discovered mosque in Rahat in Israel. And some viewers have even hinted that this newly discovered mosque contradicts the idea that Petra was the first holy city of Islam. After all, some articles put the date of the construction of this mosque as far back as being built just after the death of Muhammad. Now, I don't think such an early date is correct, and I do think that the Rahat Mosque fits quite nicely into the overall picture. So here's my explanation. First of all, let me give a disclaimer. The full archaeological reports are not out yet. So this is not the last words. Archaeologists traditionally dig one season, and then the next season they go through and catalog their findings. It's not until the third season that they publish at the earliest. So everything I say here is said without seeing the archaeological reports. Second, as far as I know, everyone is getting their news from the media. And the media have a tendency to exaggerate and make it sensational, or even get it wrong. Now, as far as I can tell, the initial news was broken by the BBC, and there was a sudden interest. I don't think the reporters realized that there was controversy around the earliest mosques. They were quite surprised when the media took off, and lots of people were emailing one another about it. Even I got a handful of emails about the initial story. Notice the headline. Israel Mosque Find. Archaeologists unearth 1,200-year-old ruins in the desert. Now, do the math. 1,200 years ago is 820. So, I think this is a good headline. If you read the article, it tells us that archaeologists excavated the oldest mosque yet found in Israel. Notice what it says. It says, found in Israel. Now, a few months later, the headlines have developed. Now, some news sources are reporting discovery of one of the oldest mosques in the world was discovered in Israel. All of this is being thrown on the page of news feeds, and the Rahat dig is still very early. The full archaeological reports haven't come out yet. Notice the headline in Live Science from July. This ancient mosque in Israel may have been built just a few years after Muhammad's death. How can such claims be made? Notice that the headline says, may have been built just a few years after Muhammad's death. The word may is very important here. Under the photo it says, this rural mosque likely served nearby farmers sometime between AD 600 and 700. Notice the words likely. Before the article goes on to explain itself, it makes sure that it explains to us this may be the truth. And it also says most likely, but may not end up being what we say. So it is maybe news, and it's a very early announcement. In the Daily Beast, the headline is very explicit. It says, if the dating turns out to be correct, the newly discovered mosque was built only a few years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE. Notice the date, 632. Well, this is sensational news, but it also includes the statement, if this turns out to be correct. What if it doesn't turn out to be correct? Well, in that case, what will happen? Nothing. Nothing will be said. The news will have moved on. The full reports will be published in some journal somewhere, and the archaeologists or historians, they may or may not find it, and they may or may not read it. I cringe whenever the news throws up these great headlines. I remember when the discovery of Ubar in Oman was flashed all across the news, and it turned out to be just a small caravanserai, not a major find. Sorry, it wasn't Ubar, not even close. But it was too late. The world had already heard and believed that Ubar was in Oman. And I have an article on the website, and it tells the whole sordid story. So, now we come to the question of dating the mosque in Rahat. In this case, the archaeologists also uncovered a nearby village, complete with multiple stone walls, similar to those used in the construction of the mosque. The Daily Planet proudly proclaims the remains of one of the oldest mosques in the world. And if this date is correct, this means that the newly discovered mosque was built only a few years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD. Wow! This is an amazing find, especially since it was followed up by a quote from the director of the excavation who says the mosque dates from the 7th or the 8th centuries. Do you see the confusion here? When the media throws out a date of 632, it seems like it's a very early mosque. But 632 was the time when the Muslim armies were just entering the area. Somebody picked up that date and did some calculations, and I don't think they got it right. As far as I can tell, the oldest mosque was a place of prayer in Jerusalem that dates from 636. That's 15 after the Hijrah. And it was replaced by the Al-Aqsa Mosque in 90 after the Hijrah. So how can this news article claim that this small rural mosque predates even Al-Aqsa? Now, none of the articles tell us how this early date was arrived at. Was there carbon dating? But rocks contain no carbon, and so they can't be dated with carbon dating in the same way. So the rocks of this mosque itself are not useful. Did the archaeologists turn to a nearby settlement and assume that the settlement and the mosque dated from the same era? I've heard of no carbon dating reports, and that is why we must wait for the actual report, a peer-reviewed report, before we jump to conclusions. Right now, this mosque has all the headlines, and those headlines may be giving a false impression. From the dig, we do know that Muslims occupied this site, and apparently they took over from the local farms and built a mosque. But the settlement may predate the mosque. By the time that the hype is over and the archaeologists get around to publishing their reports, perhaps a truer perspective will emerge. But how does one go about dating a mosque like this? Now, I want to suggest 5 methods that can be used. Number 1 is inscriptions on the building or nearby. Many mosques have inscriptions of who built them, or when the mihrab was built, or when a door was added, or something about the structure. That's very common. This mosque has no inscriptions. Second, maybe the construction is mentioned in an ancient manuscript. The construction of important mosques was often mentioned in manuscripts, helping us date the mosque. But this is a village mosque, and so far there's been no found mention of it in any early manuscripts. Now, the third way of determining a date is some other thing at the site. Maybe we find some coins. Maybe there was something in the town nearby, or some different changes that were made, something we can use to date the building. The fourth way we can ask, is it post or pre-mihrab? Now, from Islamic history, we know the mihrab, or that round prayer niche, that was first developed in the city of Medina in 69 after the Hijrah, or 708 AD. That's an established date. And this small village mosque has a mihrab. It's part of the building structure, not added later. So this building does not date before 708 AD. Even then, it took time for the practice of using the mihrab to spread out from Medina and to move around. And so the first mihrab was made in Medina, but then it took time for it to get. So now we can see that this has got a mihrab, so it dates after 708. So whoever claims this mosque dates way back to 636 AD must be just wanting to grab headlines. Now, the fifth way to date a mosque is to use the orientation. Where does this mosque face? That will help us fit the mosque into the different periods of time, based on other mosques of similar orientation. So here are the measurements. From Rahat to face Mecca, which was 1,200 kilometers away, it would face 154 degrees. From to face Petra, which is only 137 kilometers away, it would face 149.5 degrees. If it was a between mosque, which was 489 kilometers away, it would face 157.2 degrees. Now, all of these are very close. We're talking about a difference of only 4.5 degrees on either side of Mecca. Now, Dr. Shum, who's been analyzing the early Qiblas, tells us that 50% of the Qiblas are plus or minus 3 degrees, and over 80% are plus or minus 5 degrees. So they're quite accurate. So this mosque could be a Petra mosque. It could be a Mecca mosque. It might even be a Between mosque. The Between mosques were built within a 66-year period. But since we have no other supporting evidence, at least not that the archaeologists have told us, based on the existence of a Qibla that's built into the original wall, that mihrab, that Qibla direction, we must say it was built after 708 AD. So this is not the oldest mosque in the world. It's not even the oldest mosque in Israel. It is simply a very small rural mosque, probably built by a local Muslim family. This mosque was never built with a roof. There's no evidence of that. The walls are not wide enough or strong enough to support the roof structure. It's a typical open-air mosque in the Negev. Now consider the Beersheba Mosque. This open-air mosque was first published about in 1972, and it has appeared in journal articles in 1988 and 1996. Of course, the media doesn't know this, and I doubt they care about it. Probably the archaeologists who are excavating in Israel there, they themselves probably didn't know about the articles about these other mosques in the Negev. There's whole papers written comparing the shape of the early open-air mosques in the Negev. This mosque in Israel is not unique, nor is it early. Consider the early mosques at Bir Karkum, or Nahal Obed, or Nahal Arad, or Bir Hator, or Har Obed. These are all early open-air mosques, and they're in the Negev. These are open-air mosques, and they're just like the mosque built in Rahat. These mosques have no building on them. They're simply land cleared away, stones laid out so the faithful can pray. Archaeologists finding these mosques, they didn't announce that they were the oldest mosques in the world. They didn't even announce that they were the oldest mosque in Israel. But they researched them, and they published articles on them. So please, when the media gets all hyped up about something, read the article very carefully. Does the director of the dig make these outlandish claims, or is it the media? Listen to what the archaeologists are saying. This is what it says in one of these articles. According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, the building was constructed around 600 or 700 AD when the region was mostly rural farmland. The directors of the excavation, John Siliman and Shahur Zur, described their discovery as a small rural mosque dated to the 7th or the 8th centuries. That's the Common Era. It's a rare find anywhere in the world, especially in an area north of Beersheba, where no similar buildings have previously been discovered. This is true. The mosques I refer to are south of Beersheba. This one is north of Beersheba, so I guess it was special in that way. Not nearly as exciting as the article makes it out to be. The Rahat Mosque dates to after 708 AD, maybe even 100 years after 708, long after the Muslim armies had arrived. It is not the earliest mosque found in all the world, nor even the earliest mosque found in Israel, nor even the earliest mosque found in the Negev. I'm Dan Gibson, and this has been another question and answer video.